What books are the oldest and the newest on my TBR based on their publication date? Hi friends and readers, this week's reading vlog, I'm going to be picking up the oldest book on my TBR and the newest book on my TBR based on the day that they were published. So not based on how long they've been sitting on my TBR. But now that I say that, that's a good idea too. If you have never been to my channel, I read about 1 to 2 books in a week while working full time. My job is a little bit of work from home and work in person each week, so I have some flexibility on getting a lot of reading done. And as we approach the end of the year, I've already met my reading goal for the year, so I'm trying to find unique ways to get books off of my TBR. And that is why I am going to Fable, and if you don't use Fable to track your books, I'm sure there's another version of this feature on other reading apps, but specific to Fable, you can go to your want to read list, and at the top, you can filter it by genre, but also you can sort it by, oh, I'm actually a complete liar. Fable does not have this feature, but Goodreads does. If you go to your TBR on Goodreads, you can filter it by publication year. And when I do publication year, there is a book that is by far the oldest on my list. And then when you reverse it, you can do ones that are by far the newest on my list. Really, there's not much else to say. I've already acquired the first book for this week, and it is from an author I've only read one book of, but this was a 6-star book. So I am super excited to finally pick up another book by this author. And that book is Hello. It has been a full day since I last talked to you, and I did in fact start the oldest book on my TBR based on publication date, and that is Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. I think I showed some clips yesterday of me reading this book on my lunch break, and then I absolutely binged it also all night long. We didn't have anything to do except for watch some football last night, and so I just sat down and read until probably 11 o'clock. I think I got like 3 hours of reading in. This book is by Kristen Hanna, and I was mentioning earlier that I have read one other book by Kristen Hanna, and that is The Nightingale. The Nightingale is a 6-star read for me. It's been my favorite book of the year so far, and I definitely don't think anything could top it except for maybe this book. I sobbed so many times reading The Nightingale. There's a video out there of it. I believe I read that book in a video that was reading the highest rated and lowest rated book on my TBR, and The Nightingale, of course, at the time was the highest rated. I have seen that they are going to make a movie out of The Nightingale with the Fanning sisters, who are my absolute favorites. So I'm so excited to see that come to life. And looking at the front of this book, you can just see how many books Kristen Hanna has written. This book was published in 2008, and I know that Kristen Hanna is still writing books, and from this list, it's just tons. So I know that Kristen Hanna's backlog is something I want to work through, especially if I have a good experience with this book, knowing how I felt about The Nightingale. I mean, there's 22 listed here, and I know that there's some more recent ones that aren't written on here, so there's got to be more than that. First, I want to just talk about the cover and just how I personally feel picking up Firefly Lane. I was, of course, already excited for it, but I also just love the idea of a firefly. I know they exist, and I've seen them in real life, and they just feel so nostalgic as seeing them as a kid, and how mystical and magical it felt to see a firefly. Like, even to this day, we bought our house this past summer, and when the fireflies were out in the yard, it just feels so comforting. I don't know what it is, so I'm kind of bringing that joy and that feeling into reading this book just because I can. I would say that this book is probably women's fiction or contemporary fiction, and if I'm being honest, you can see it on the cover as well. I knew about Firefly Lane in the context of the TV series. This has been adapted into a series or show on on Netflix, and I remember years ago seeing that show. I believe it had Katherine Heigl in it. I'm really not sure. The lady from Grey's Anatomy, like early Grey's Anatomy. I remember seeing this become a show released on Netflix, and I had no ties at the time to reading, to knowing Kristen Hanna, or to knowing that this was a book. And now I can remember seeing that for the first time and pairing it with the book. No, I have not watched that TV series, but if I love the book, then maybe I'll go back and watch it. And since I started it yesterday on my lunch break, I've actually ran through it. I think that I'm a little bit under halfway through. It's a chunkier book. I'm at page 222, which I happen to stop in the middle of a chapter, but close to chapter 19. Also, I just love picking bookmarks that match the book that I have. I have tons of bookmarks, and this one just feels also so nostalgic. I thought it was a perfect fit. It's one of those old ones that says hang out and read. How cute. So coming into picking this book, I'm not going to give any spoilers other than what you could read on the back of the book. All I knew that Firefly Lane was about two women and just a story of friendship, and 220 something pages into the book, that's exactly what it is. We start out with an opening chapter where we can tell that something has gone wrong. There's this set of friends who have been best friends for years and years and years. Something happened and they're no longer talking to each other. But that's the beauty of a book like this, is you start it out, it's literally the first thing you read, but then you forget about it because we go back in time to when their friendship first started. So we are following Kate and Tully, and the whole point of their names also written out is that it very, very briefly in this lifetime, they were Kate and they were Tully, but now they're Kate and Tully smashed together. And I just wanted to read off the back of the book because I think it's a very good spoiler-free way of telling you what's going on with Kate and Tully. In a way, it's the story of all women, of who we are and what we care about and how much friendship matters. This book starts out in the 1970s when Kate and Tully first meet each other and just the different backgrounds that they come from. Kate has a family that is wholesome and loving and all under one roof, but she feels like herself will never fit in. She's always got her head in a book. And then we meet Tully, who is from a torn apart family. Her dad doesn't exist in the picture, and her mom, you'll read about, is in and out, very inconsistent with their own problems. And despite this, Tully is very popular. She knows what she wants and she gets what she wants. And then the two meet and it's history since then. I'm at the point where we have gone through them in junior high, high school, college, and now 220 something pages in, we are post-college, and just learning their stories and their lives has been so interesting. As I continue to pick up more contemporary fiction, women's fiction, I think that this is more of a genre that I'm drawn to that I never knew I was drawn to. I would probably say that I like romance and I like romantic fantasy better until I read books like this. I'm like, wow, I think this is somewhere I need to dive deeper into. We're gonna keep reading. I don't know how much further we're gonna get. It's Tuesday. I actually really would like to finish this book in the next day because our newest book on the list is longer than this one, surprisingly. But I'll update you maybe when I'm finished. I'm sitting in my office, and as you probably could just tell, I've completely failed to update you anywhere in the middle of this book besides the last time I talked to you, which I was approaching halfway through. And that is just because it's hard to put words to a story like this one. We'll go ahead and spoil the next few minutes of me gabbing on about Kristen Hanna's Firefly Lane because I'm rating it a 5-star. I just spent the last few minutes bawling my eyes out in my office finishing this book. Had to take my jacket off so I could dry all of my tears with it. Firefly Lane was just about 479 pages, and I started on Monday and finished today, which is Wednesday. This makes 2 back-to-back 5-star reads for Kristen Hanna for me. I just love the story of friendship that we get in this story. I think if you know you like fiction, women's fiction, contemporary fiction, soon, then you're going to pick this book up and absolutely love it. I would recommend this book to someone who wants to read about friendship, to someone who enjoys people watching, who wants to hear about people's stories. I could totally see this being two real women named Tully and Kate and Tully out in this universe. I can sit down and be with them in their story. In fact, I just did for the last nearly 500 pages. From start to finish, you are following Tully and Kate across years and years and years of friendship, 30 to 40 years of friendship, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. This definitely feels a little bit like historical fiction in some ways. You can see that Kristen Hanna spent some time pulling out references from the 70s, the 80s, growing up as a young girl in the 70s and the 80s. You can definitely see some political insight that's impacting the families in this story. Little grabs that someone who was born in the 2000s didn't get as much as that because the characters are adults by the time they make it to the 2000s, but even then I could feel connected to them in the time that they were existing. And you start this book out knowing that something is going to tear this friendship apart, but it even says that on the back, something that puts their friendship to the ultimate test. And you know that from the first chapter, but then you go backwards in time and just see what friendship and what bond and what love they build over the years. So throughout reading it, I just couldn't imagine what it could possibly be that would pull their friendship apart. And then you get to learn a little bit more towards the end of the story. I think so far reading The Nightingale and now Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna, you can tell that this is an author who writes women so well. The different sides of women as well. You saw it in The Nightingale and in this one too, where there's societal pressures for women to be successful and to have careers. And then there's societal pressures for women to have children and be a stay-at-home mom and be the best mom that they can be, but also you can't have a career if you're going to be a mom, or you can have a career if you're going to be a mom, but if you choose one way or the other and not both, either way you're choosing something in the eyes of someone else wrong. And she writes that so well in a way that as a woman I also can understand and get behind in the little years of life that I've lived. I will say there are topics of grief and addiction in this story that are very heavy, but I think that she writes it so well in a way that if you've experienced grief yourself, or if you've experienced addiction yourself or in your family or those that you love, it's a story that is still so beautiful to read. So we have finally taken off the second Kristen Hanna book. I am so excited to pick up all of the mini in her backlog. If you have a Kristen Hanna book that's not The Nightingale or Firefly Lane that you think I should choose next, please let me know. Definitely pick up a Kristen Hanna book if it's anything you ever do. I don't think you'll regret it. So a 2008 publication date off my TBR. We have our newest book on my TBR coming up for the rest of this week. With it being Wednesday, I'm gonna take the night to watch some Survivor. We're almost approaching the finale of Survivor, and maybe take a little bit of a brain break from the fog that was Firefly Lane and get back to reading tomorrow. I'll introduce that newest book, then talk to you later. Hello friends and readers. It is actually quite a few days later. Well, not quite a few. I think I last talked to you on Wednesday and it's now Friday. And you have seen what the newest book based on publication date is on my TBR. And that is Brimstone by Callie Hart. This book just came out, I think, this past November. It's now the middle of December. And this book being released, it is book number 2 in the Fate and the Alchemy series, with book number 1 being Quicksilver. With all of the hype around the release of this book and this eye-catching cover that I saw everywhere all over my feed and internet, I decided last month or early this month that I wanted to pick up Quicksilver. Quicksilver had been on my TBR, which is the first book in the series, and I thought, what better time to pick up the first book than when the second book just launched and I can go right into it if I need to. I think that the Fate and Alchemy series will be a trilogy. I have not fact-checked that and I am not for certain, but that's That's the rumblings I remember hearing. I read Quicksilver in a video where I did how much can I read in 24 hours, Vic's version, so go watch that if you want to hear my thoughts on Quicksilver. With this being book number 2, I'm not going to speak too much to what Brimstone is about because I would not want to spoil anything from Quicksilver. I did rate it in that 24-hour video a 5 stars, and I'll give you a little bit of a summary of what Quicksilver is about so you kind of know maybe where book 2 in the series could go without having any spoilage. Now, I said that I picked up Quicksilver in that first video because I wanted to be able to just go right into book number 2 with its new release if I wanted to. However, that did not happen. It's about 2 weeks since I last read it, and the reason being is Quicksilver, the first book, was on Kindle Unlimited, and I pay for Kindle Unlimited, so I thought perfect, I can just read it without having to pay extra money for it. In my head, I don't know much about the process of getting a book on Kindle Unlimited. I hear things around like it's before they're traditionally published that they'll be on there, and then if they get picked up, whatever picked up means, no clue, they're not on there anymore, or the rest of the series isn't. I have no clue. It's something I should look into so I can understand what books are available to me and what aren't. All that to say, Brimstone did not go on to Kindle Unlimited, and I didn't want to purchase it at the time. I had bought some other books, and I don't buy a lot of books. I try to stick to Kindle Unlimited or Libby or the local library, but with it being a new release, it was waiting forever on Libby, and my library doesn't have a copy of it just yet. And then my amazing coworker allowed me to borrow her book, and I just think this is the sleekest, cutest design with these sprayed like chrome fire looking edges, and I'm really glad and thankful to her that she let me borrow it so I could read it just 2 weeks after the first one. I do wonder if with this just being a hardback cover, I really don't know, but this cover does not match the face picture of Quicksilver that I'm imagining, so I wonder why there's such a stark difference. But this edition is so pretty. It has those edges, but it also has this art on the inside and then onyx on the front, and I think there's some on the back as well. Oh my gosh. Okay, I am obsessed with this. I'm going to go ahead and shed this dust cover because I don't want to ruin it for my friend when I give it back to her, and I have greasy fingers apparently. One thing I'll note in this that's really helped me reading the second book, paperback or hard copy versus on the Kindle, that this is a fantasy world where the pronunciations are very tricky if you're not listening or being able to go back to reference the pronunciation guide in the Kindle edition. But now having the pronunciation guide at the beginning of this book, I've been able to go back and forth a lot better to actually say the names correctly in my head. We are following in Quicksilver Sarah's Fane. She's our main character in this world. She lives in a city slash, what do you call that, world, realm, where the poor people are basically isolated off into a specific ward. She's, I believe, in ward 3. Am I completely making this up? Something along the lines of she lives in this desert-like place where they do not give the people who are in this section any clean water, resources. They feel like they have the plague, so they isolate them, and it's the rich become rich and the poor become poorer kind of situation. And so she is constantly fighting and stealing and thieving to get those resources for herself and her brother. Not a good family life. In fact, I don't think her family is even around besides her brother, and she works for a metal forger. So she ends up pissing the people off, Queen's guards, by getting caught stealing some things to just try and survive, and she lands in the bad graces of their queen. Now, their queen is sort of undying and no one knows why. This is a human world. How has this queen lasted so many years on this earth? They don't know why. Unbeknownst to her, she is sort of noticing things when she picks up metal, that there's like a little bit of a tinkering feeling and something suspicious is happening around those types of items, but she can't put words to it or understand why. And then one day she accidentally basically trips and falls into a Fey world, not literally. Can't reveal the plot too much, but she finds herself in a Fey world that she had no clue about. And then she also finds herself with one of the most powerful Fey, Kingfisher. They're bound together in a way that means that he's using her and she's gonna use him. She needs to get back to the human world while understanding how she fell into the Fey world. And then he knows that, of course, the name of the series, Fey and Alchemy, she has some sort of alchemy powers that he's going to help her discover slash use for his own benefit. in his Fae world. Kingfisher in Quicksilver is very dark, very broody, very shadowy, and there's great tension between these two. And really I can't say much else because we are in book number 2. Their story has ended in a certain way on Quicksilver that I was so excited to jump into with Brimstone. There is a lot of comedic effect. There's characters in here who are just hilarious, specifically one that I'm thinking of who has come from book 1 to book 2, quite funny. But we have a lot to figure out, and we are page 120 in a pretty large book. We've got a long ways to go. I have been reading and also listening. I was listening today on my way home from work and my Spotify hours freaking kicked me out in the middle of a chapter. This book is dual point of view between Kingfisher and Ceres, and I did not think that that was dual point of view in the first book. I could be wrong, but I don't think it was. And so we're just gonna keep trudging along. I have some errands to run tomorrow to help some folks out, so I'll probably listen to it on audio. I might try to find a free version somewhere and then read all day Saturday evening to see how far we can get into this book. But I'm feeling so good about it. It was a romantasy series that I just needed in the time that I started Quicksilver, and I'm so glad that I know these characters and can just dive right back into it a little bit of the ways in. I will update you later. Well, hello. It has been some time. I think the last time I updated you, it was a Friday. I've since changed my nails to a sparkly Christmas nail. My cat is coming to say hello. Hi, buddy. And it is now Monday. It is Monday at about 12:36 p.m. I am working from home today and I'm on my lunch break. And this book, Brimstone by Callie Hart, has just been kicking my butt. I think that I am nearing halfway through the book. Chapter 24, page 307. So I still have a ways to go. I think it's like 650 something or 660 pages exactly. 660 minus 306. 354 pages. So we are approaching halfway. I don't want to say too much about what's going on in the book, but there is just a lot. We are learning so much information, and it's one of those things where if I was sitting down to read this all in one day, I would be so invested and so deeply rooted in all of the plot and all of the characters and all of the history that we're learning about the Fae world, the human world, how the heck all these characters are going to come back, because we talked about so many in Quicksilver, we sort of lost all of them right now, and we've got to find them all again and where they make sense in the story. And I am just in a busy season of life with Christmas approaching and the holidays and my last full week of working. Things are just really busy, so I feel like I'm not investing a lot of sit down time to reading, and I'm just listening and reading here and there, and has thus left me where I am. I know this is a massive book and 300 pages in the last few days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday is a lot of pages still, but I wish I was a little bit more invested in the book or had a little bit more time to sit aside. All that to say, I do have a bit more time this afternoon, Monday, to just sit down and read some after work today. And so I want to knock out a large chunk of what's left in this book today and tomorrow, if at all possible, because I kind of want to get out of a fantasy world, even though I was really dying to be in one, and read a little bit of comfy, cozy Christmas books next week. So we're gonna keep on trudging, and I'll update you how I'm feeling the second half of the book. And I think honestly, I'm not gonna update you till I finish, since there's not much I can say other than the fact that I still love the shadows. I still love what's going on there. I just want to feel more excited about it, and I think just sitting down and taking the time will allow me to do so. Talk to you later. Okay, I have just finished this massive book. My hand was cramping on the last few chapters of the book, holding all the weight in this hand while reading this side of the book. I'm just going to get straight into the rating. I think I'm gonna give this a 4-star. I enjoyed my time, but also at the same time felt like reading this week, maybe not in particular this book, but reading this week and last week, just being so busy and having so much to do, while also at the same time just wanting to do nothing and rot on the couch on my phone, has nearly put me into a book slump. And maybe it's the length of the book. I don't think it's the content of the book. Now that I'm done, I can finally put the dust cover back on. My cat's scratching on a scratcher. And return this book back to my friend. Even though it's so pretty, I wish I had something like this on my shelf as well. So yeah, a 4-star, and I do have some thoughts without being very spoiler at all. I think I couldn't rate it a 5-star because I was so confused a lot of this book. Maybe because I'm reading and listening on and off. But I know that I'm not utterly positive about what was going on in this book because at the end, of course, we end on yet another cliffhanger. The first book Quicksilver did, and now Brimstone does. And I was confused because I didn't know who was who in the scenario, even though it was directly said. I don't put the two pieces together. And so I need to go back and watch some videos on this book and the implications and think that I will do better listening to other people's thoughts. For some reason, my head just wasn't in it, but I still enjoyed the ride. First of all, I love the fire sprites in the story. I love Guru and I love Onyx. That's all I'll say about those characters. And so, yeah. Also, in Quicksilver, we learn about 3 different characters that finishing up Quicksilver I thought was going to be the basis of Brimstone. Following those 3 characters and their plot and how big they were to our main character, Ceres and Kingfisher. And then those 3 characters kind of just disappear and you never hear from them at all in this story. So I imagine that maybe the 3rd book is the final book and that it will clear all those things up, but I was hoping for more of them. Having not understood a lot of the history and the plot building in this story, that led to my confusion. Also, I just have a really hard time imagining all of the different settings because we are bouncing around place to place to place, and when I'm not imagining the setting in my head, I feel like I'm not listening or reading as intently because I can't bring it up in my mind. And all the different creatures, and I know that Callie Hart does a good job of explaining what they look like when you meet them and see them again occasionally, but it was just hard for me this time. I am still excited for the 3rd book. I'll definitely have to dive into some summaries of books 1 and 2 next year if and when the 3rd book comes out. I know I'll have forgotten a lot of this, which is the pain point of picking up books 1 and 2 well before the final book comes out. And I'm saying it's the final book, but I have not confirmed that. So I looked it up and it does say that the 3rd book is not titled yet or released its title yet, but it's scheduled for November 10th of next year, which I believe Brimstone came out in November of this year. So that would make sense to put a year between the publications. And now that we have finally read the newest book on my TBR based on publication date versus the oldest book, I think I'd had a really good time with both of these books this week. It just is a slump season for me after reading for pretty much all year round for the first time in a long time. I am excited. Next week I plan on just picking up some cozy Christmas reads to finish out the year. And let me know if I should do this another time because I'm sure as I add to my TBR, the oldest and the newest book will continue to change on my TBR. That's all. Bye for now.